Hey guys, welcome back to another video of Marvel Contest of Champions. Today we're going to be taking a look at Man-Thing, the very next champion to be coming to the contest in October 2019. Now this video was made possible, of course, by the Content Creator Program, who granted me early and temporary access to the character, got him access to him for a couple days, make some videos, make some review type videos, and yeah, this is one of them. Clearly, Captain Obvious here. But yeah, we're just gonna kind of go over a few of his abilities. I'll kind of give my thoughts about them, kind of go over the pros and cons of the champion. I'm trying to make some sort of format for these videos. Right now, I have absolutely nothing. I just have a list of notes in front of me, and I'm just gonna go through them. There's sort of an order to them, but kind of not, so bear with me. I'm gonna try to improve on these videos kind of in the future, but as for today, we're just gonna go with what we've been doing for the last little while here. So, like I said, I've got a list of notes here, no particular order. I'm just going to kind of start going through them. I've just kind of got bullet points, some of his main abilities and kind of some of the, I guess, more important abilities that this guy has. First up is that Man-Thing is immune to armor break and armor shatter. Now, the reason they give for this is because of what his body is made of. Now, I don't know exactly what his body's made of, but basically he's a swamp monster made out of plants and goop and all sorts of other fun stuff. So because of that, he's basically immune to that sort of thing. Like, you can't really break a person who doesn't even really have armor. His body just kind of molds to all of your punches, technically. So yeah, you just can't get that off on him, which is really nice. But another thing, due to his lack of blood, which is something I didn't know about the character, he is also bleed immune. So I guess technically that makes him a double immunity champion, though maybe not in the way that most people think of it. When I think of double immunities, I usually think of like bleed immune, incinerate immune, shock immune, kind of poison immune. Those are usually kind of the main ones people think of. But yeah, on top of that though, one thing that he has that's kind of an immunity but is also kind of not is that critical hits don't do as much damage, or they don't do bonus damage to him, and this is again because of what his body's made of. Again, you just kind of like punching just a I don't know what's a squishy, like, I don't know, like squishy gummy? That's not a great analogy, but we're gonna go with it. It's like punching a squishy gummy. I've been trying to record this for like 15 minutes now. I keep messing up. We're gonna go with it. Squishy gummy it is. But also on top of that, one thing that this guy has, one ability that is a little more frequent, or a little more, I guess, a more important part of his utility kit, I guess, is his ability to nullify enemy buffs. Now, doesn't sound like that's anything super duper special. Lots of other champions have this, but this does kind of intertwine with a later ability that I'll talk about in a second here. So it's kind of like another one, which kind of like it's one step of a chain of abilities that equals, or that leads to something greater. So we'll get on to more about that in just a second here. But overall, though, kind of what Man-Thing is, you know, I'm just realizing, have I said Swamp Thing at all so far? I feel like I've said Swamp Thing at one point. I feel like if I haven't, I'm gonna say that at one point. But anyway, Man-Thing, like I said, I'm totally getting off track on these videos today. But anyway, Man-Thing. What I've seen a lot of the other content creators kind of compare him to is King Groot. Kind of just a big guy, not necessarily a huge offensive champion, but a very strong defensive champion, and that he's just a big thick boy that just won't die. And part of kind of what helps with that, rather, is his awakened ability called Strength of the Swamp. Now this is actually a very simple awakened ability. So basically, depending on where you are health-wise, you will get one of two buffs added to your champion. So if you are above 50% health, pardon me, you have a 100% chance to gain a Fury buff, of course increasing your attack, which is awesome, especially for Man-Thing. He's definitely a character that does need a bit of an attack buff there, so that's awesome. However, if you go down below 50%, you do get a temporary regen buff. It lasts for 10 seconds, I believe it is, if I remember correctly, and yeah, it kind of gets you. What's kind of nice is if you get that regen when you're right around 50% health, you don't drop down too far, rather. When you get back over 50% health, you'll swap it out and you'll get that Fury buff again. So kind of what you can do is, if your character is hovering around that 50% health range, like within a few percent and whatnot, you can basically just keep swapping back between a regen and a fury buff, which ties into the fact that he just won't die, because you'll keep getting him back below 50%, then he'll regen up to just over 50, get the fury buff again, hit you a little bit, you hit him, he drops below 50, gets the regen buff, goes above 50, gets the fury. It's just kind of like potentially an endless cycle. However, of course, you know, if you're fighting Man-Thing, you want to make sure you drop him well below 50%, that way that regen won't get him back up over 50%, but whether you're playing as Man-Thing and can stay around there, or you're fighting a Man-Thing that is staying around that 50% health range, that could potentially be a very long and annoying fight. But another ability that I want to talk about is one called Toxic Pustules. Not sure how to pronounce this word, to be completely honest, but this is the ability that ties into his nullify ability that I mentioned earlier. Now, this Toxic Pustules, whatever, Toxic P, we're gonna call it. Toxic P is technically a buff. So what this does is a Toxic P buff is not applied to Man-Thing, but is applied to his opponent. Now, from what I understand, while it's applied to the opponent, it does absolutely nothing. At least nothing that I've noticed. I may have missed something. I may be wrong. Feel free to correct me in the comments. But from what I understand, this does basically nothing to your opponent. However, when this ability is nullified, as mentioned, Man-Thing has a very high chance to nullify an opponent's buffs. When this technical buff on the enemy is nullified, this Toxic P buff turns into a Poison and Armor Break debuff. So if you can get a couple Toxic P buffs on your opponent and then nullify both of them, you can get a couple Poison and Armor Break debuffs on your enemy like right away, and you can start putting some decent damage into this guy. Now, it is nice that Man-Thing does have this poison ability. The thing is, it's not super easy to access. Now, because the Toxic P buffs only last a certain amount of time on your opponent, they will burn out after a little while. You're not guaranteed to get that Poison and Armor Break debuff, and without those, you're kind of screwed. It's kind of one thing that I'll mention a little bit is kind of one of Man-Thing's weaknesses is if you're also fighting against an opponent that is poison immune. It's not going to go well. Let's just say either it'll go very poorly, or it'll just be a very, very long fight. So you want to be very careful when using this ability, but Man-Thing, I would say, definitely kind of needs this Toxic P buff to make things work a little bit better, because kind of without that, his damage output isn't that great. But the very last ability that I want to talk about does help with that kind of lacking damage output, pardon me, I'm totally blanking on the words here, is his ability called Empathic Agitation. It's a passive ability, and basically what this does is it boosts his attack. So you gain these agitation buffs to Man-Thing, and you gain them when you are struck by an enemy or you hit them a certain way. Like if you're hitting, I believe if I remember correctly, the exact description of it was if you would strike a buffed enemy and you hit them with a certain attack. It's not just your basic attack. I believe it was like a medium attack, maybe the heavy attacks as well. Specific attacks will grant you this agitation buff, which is basically, as I said, an attack boost. I believe it's technically like a fury, a smaller version of a fury buff, and these do stack. I believe you can get up to a stack of 100 of these, because every time you are struck, I believe you get a stack of 5 added to Man-Thing, and then you get a different amount depending on, or you get a different amount if you are attacking the enemy, or a buffed enemy rather. So it does sound like it could definitely build up his attack very quickly. The downside is, and something that helps balance it out a little bit, is the fact that these agitation buffs drop off after a little while. One thing though that is nice about this, though, kind of like a way to kind of counteracting ability, is that the fact that if you are fighting a villain, or if you're fighting an enemy that is buffed, there will be a delay in the time that these agitation buffs are dropped off. Now, these agitation buffs will start dropping off immediately after they're gained. It does take a few seconds for them to completely drop off, but they will start immediately. However, if again you are fighting an enemy that is a villain or is a buffed opponent, there will be a bit of a delay in the start time for that drop off, so your buff will last a few seconds more. I believe it is a 5-second delay. I might be wrong on that one, but I believe it was a 5-second delay. So yeah, kind of the main kind of, I guess, purpose of all of Man-Thing's abilities is kind of just overall just to boost his attack, and if you can't get these activated, it's kind of like you're fighting with pillow hands again. That was kind of one thing I did notice in a few fights while using him. It was kind of went back to like a pillow hands, kind of like old Luke Cage pillow hands kind of character. So you definitely need these abilities moving forward with Man-Thing, so you want to be careful, especially when you're choosing your fights, because if you're going up against an opponent that is, for example, poison immune or armor break immune, something like that, probably not the good choice, or probably not the best choice for the champion. But that kind of leads me on to the cons of Man-Thing. As I mentioned, he is, I think honestly, he's just going to be an awful choice against poison immune champions. Just kind of avoid at all costs, really, because I think he really does need that poison buff just to make him a more viable champion. Otherwise, you're going to be in store for some very long fights. That's also one thing about Man-Thing. Kind of overall, his fights do take a little bit longer. So you definitely, if you can, the faster you can get those poison debuffs going, and the more armor break you can get on your opponent, that will definitely shorten the fight. But if you can't get those going, yeah, you're in for a long fight. So that's the one downside, not the one downside, but it is one of the more major downsides about Man-Thing. But also part of that is just the fact that he's also a little bit of a slower champion in his movements. I'll admit I did feel a little sluggish using him. So it kind of all just kind of ties in. This is a character that's I think meant for slightly longer fights. Like, he's meant to last. Like, you can put a bunch of damage into him. If you're fighting a Man-Thing, he can take a bunch of damage. So I think again, he's going to be a very good defensive champion. Offensive champion, probably not. Again, unless you can like really stack your poison debuffs and your armor break debuffs, I think he's going to be kind of another kind of King Groot type character. And then kind of the last thing, at least on the side of the cons, that I just want to mention is something that the other members of the content creator program, I've heard them say. I can't actually prove this myself, but one thing I've heard a lot of people say is that Man-Thing is not a suicide friendly champion. Now, personally, I don't run suicides, so I can't prove that, but if you do run suicides, there is just a little bit of information there for you. Just be aware that he might not be the best champion if you do run suicides. Take a look into that a little bit more. I'm sure some of the other members of the content creator program have put out some information on that as well. But yeah, so overall, like, I think Man-Thing is a little bit of a disappointment, a little bit maybe like, maybe not a disappointment, but a little underwhelming, a little subpar is a word that I've kind of used, or I've heard, used to describe him a little bit with Elsa Bloodstone as well. But Man-Thing, yeah, a little bit subpar. But I guess just kind of the last thing though I want to go over, I want to try to make sure this video isn't too long. The very last thing I just want to go over is some of his animations. Man-Thing is a very interesting looking character. His animations though, they almost seem like a little goofy. I don't know what it is, just maybe it's just me, but they do seem just a little bit goofy. Not to say he's like a silly character or anything like that, but it just kind of seems almost a little awkward at times. But yeah, the one animation I do really like is his heavy attack. Basically, it kind of looks like he's just basically doing a massive faceplant on the field, which is like, sure, man, you do you. I know you can take the hit, but if that was anybody else, there'd be some brain damage going on there. Now, I might be misinterpreting what I'm seeing in that animation, but that's kind of what it looks like. There is kind of a lot that goes on right there, so it is a little hard to tell what's going on, but it kind of does look like he's doing a faceplant. So yeah, overall, a little bit of a goofy acting champion, though I know he's a very serious character. But yeah, so overall, I'm not quite sure what to think of Man-Thing. I think appearance-wise, he's a very cool-looking champion. He does have some abilities that are very good, some very interesting abilities. We'll see how they will get used, like his awakened ability, the Strength of the Swamp, with that Fury or Regeneration buff depending on your health. I'll be interested to see how that gets used, and I have a feeling overall though I think we'll be seeing Man-Thing on like Alliance War defense. He'll be one of those types of characters. You know, maybe not somebody you use for. I've heard some people say he might be a good champion to use for like quests and alliance quests, but I feel like he might be like another type of like boss type character in the contest. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below though. I would love to hear what you guys think about him. You've heard what I have to say, let me know what you think in the comments below. But yeah, I think with all of that said and done, that is going to be it for this video. So I'm just going to say thank you all so much for watching. Once again, let me know what you think about Man-Thing in the comments below. As well, while you're down there, check out social media. Links are in the description below. Twitter, Discord, Twitch, all whatnot. Go check that out down below. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to the channel. We've got lots of content like this coming out all the time. So once again, feel free to subscribe. And yeah, I think that's about everything. So once again, thank you all so much for watching, taking an early look at Man-Thing in Marvel Contest Champions. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.